All right, today we're diving into a fascinating story. It's a story of complete and total collapse and a very calculated resurrection. We're going to break down this step-by-step playbook for how a public figure can claw their way back from what looks like a career-ending disaster to once again wielding some serious influence. Let's get right into it. Just look at this contrast. It's wild. On one side, you have the absolute highest of highs, being called the most influential voice of the decade. Then, on the other, the lowest possible low. Guilty on all counts. A career in ruins, the entire legacy, all that public trust, poof, gone. So how on earth do you come back from that?
And that's the big question, right? That's what we're really digging into here. Is it even possible to rebuild a public life after a fall that definitive? As we're about to see, the answer isn't simple, and it involves a very specific and very modern kind of strategy.
Okay, so let's start where it all began. Section 1, verdict, void, and vow. To get this, you have to understand the verdict that just shattered everything. The massive public void that it created and, the quiet promise to somehow make a return. To really appreciate the comeback, you have to appreciate the fall. And it wasn't like a light switch. It was a slow burn. It started with whispers, then an investigation. Pretty soon, those accusations go public, and that leads to formal charges. Each step was like a crack in the foundation, chipping away at that trust, until the final blow. The guilty verdict. A total, systematic dismantling of a public persona. And if you want to put a number on that collapse, well, here it is. Public approval didn't just take a hit, it plummeted by a staggering 85%. That is not a PR problem. That's a flatline. For pretty much any other public figure, a number like that, it's just game over. But see, this wasn't the end. The quiet period that followed, that public absence, was actually the start of a very deliberate, very calculated long game. And that brings us to Section 2, surviving the storm.
So, people call this time the wilderness years, but don't let the name fool you. This wasn't about hiding away in shame. It was an intentional public withdrawal. The silence was totally strategic. It was time spent regrouping, figuring out what went wrong, and meticulously planning every single step of a future comeback. This wasn't a retreat. It was a reload.
So how was this comeback actually engineered? Let's get into the nitty-gritty, the specific tactics, and the moves they made. This is Section 3, the comeback playbook. The whole strategy was really built on 3 core pillars. It's actually pretty simple when you break it down. First, you have to reframe the narrative. Second, you have to cultivate a new, super loyal community. And third, you have to forge strategic alliances. Let's break down each one of those. Pillar 1 was all about taking back control of the story. The key here is that the strategy wasn't to deny the verdict. That would be impossible. The strategy was to reframe it. The conversation shifted away from guilt and towards redemption. Blame was deflected onto a supposedly corrupt system, and the individual was repositioned as a victim of a big conspiracy. And then this new story was told over and over and over again across niche media channels that were eager to listen. Okay, pillar number 2, cultivate the community. So with all the mainstream platforms pretty much off the table, the focus had to shift. It was time to build a new home. This meant creating these exclusive, direct-to-supporter spaces. Think private groups, paid newsletters. This gave the remaining followers a real sense of belonging, like they had insider knowledge. And after a while, this core base, they weren't just followers anymore. They became evangelists, spreading that new narrative all on their own. And the final piece of the puzzle was forging strategic alliances. The strategy here is ancient. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. By publicly backing other controversial figures, a kind of network of mutual defense was built. They'd promote each other, they'd defend each other, and together, they used their collective voice to slowly but surely push their way back into the larger public conversation. So that's the 3-part playbook. Sounds good in theory, right? But did it actually move the needle? Let's look at the data and find what happened at the tipping point. Okay, so this is where things started. Year 1, right after the verdict. A dismal 10% favorable rating against that huge 85% unfavorable. I mean, this is absolute rock bottom. This is the numerical proof of a career that's basically turned to ash. Now, fast forward just 4 years, and look at this. The favorable rating skyrockets to 45%. The unfavorable rating drops to 40%. For the first time since the verdict, more people actually viewed the figure favorably than unfavorably. The playbook didn't just work. It completely engineered a reversal of perception for a huge chunk of the population. So, this brings us to our final section,
and a much bigger question that this whole case study brings up. In the world we live in now, does influence ever really die?
And that really leads to this critical point, which this quote just sums up perfectly. In the modern media landscape, a loyal and mobilized minority can be more powerful than a passive and disengaged majority. This case isn't just about one person's comeback. It's proof that the rules of influence have completely changed. It's not about what everyone thinks anymore. It's about how passionate a small group of your supporters are.
All of this leaves us with one final, kind of provocative question about the world we're living in right now. Does public forgiveness today really require genuine accountability, or does it just require a better strategy? Something to think about. Thanks for watching.